Hello and welcome back to PolyToots. In today's lesson we are going to be making a flow map shader using the Amplify shader editor, and I know that most of you probably want to see a shader graph version, and that will be coming soon. And I should probably note right off the bat that if you see these spheres kind of like skipping or doing weird stuff, it's probably just me putting in some cuts, because you might not be aware of this, but I actually have a speech impediment, so I often have to just trim that out, which is really annoying when I have something on screen like this and I have to make all of these little cuts, and it makes my work look shonky, but shonky's not a word. So yeah, let's just do the usual thing. I will cover briefly kind of what it is we'll be learning, and then I will put a timestamp on the screen for when the tutorial actually starts. So if you don't want any of this introduction stuff, then go ahead and skip. But I'll try to get through it really quickly, and I'll hopefully try to speed up tutorials from now on, mostly because I think shorter tutorials are preferred, but also my internet speed is absolutely redinky-donkosaurus, so uploading large files takes forever. So to kick things off, let's just talk a little bit about what a flow map shader actually does. And it's essentially just a texture that we're using to drive the UVs of our material, essentially where certain colors of a texture denote which way our texture will warp, but it has to revert back on itself, otherwise you end up with lots of clumping. And there is a free program available. I will put a link in the description for this thing called FlowMapPainter, and I think anybody who's ever done anything with flow maps has used this and has it installed. It's very cool. It just allows you to paint your own, and then you can just throw those out into a texture, and I'll do that now. So let me just, and the reason I'm doing this is because there's some stuff that you need to do to it. And if I just, this will work better on a plane actually, be right back. So we can see here I have my plane, and if I put on this new flow map that we just baked out, you can see that it looks just weird, like if we go back to the painter here, this is what it's supposed to be doing, kind of like a vortex pulling everything down, whereas the result here is clearly not the same. And it's just because we need to disable the sRGB on the correct texture. There we go, sRGB. And also if I just hit apply, this will work fine, but typically you want the compression to either be high or none, especially if you're dealing with low resolution flow maps. And it's worth noting that flow map textures can be low resolution, either none or high quality. You'll be fine, you'll be fine. So okay, that's pretty much it. That's how you get flow maps working. So now we can get rid of this, and yeah, I mean, let's just crack on with the tutorial, I guess. There's no point in hanging around here anymore. Alright, new scene, new you. Let's go ahead and create a shader, Amplify Surface Shader, flow map. And to just kind of kick things off, if any of you remember, I guess for any of the actual subscribers, I guess nearly 2 years ago now, one of my earliest tutorials was this burning shader type thing, and we did this effect whereby we were manipulating the textures via a normal map. And I've always kind of had that in mind when thinking about how to do a flow map shader, and the theory is kind of the same for anyone who's actually seen it. So I kind of always had that in mind, and the start of this will actually be the same thing. What I'm going to do here is it's just a quick little example. This is not entirely the right way, but it has some of the pieces that we need. So we'll use a texture object, which will be our flow map texture, and we only want the red and the green channels, so we'll get a component mask node and we'll feed this into here. Only use RNG. This is kind of where it gets a bit weird, like some of this stuff we're probably not going to keep. So if I just use this as a test, I'm going to multiply this component mask by just a test property now, and we'll stick that into there. And then what we'll do is we will add some UV coordinates onto this, and then we will feed that into another texture. So what that means is I'm basically telling this texture to be the UVs of this texture, and we are adding in texture coordinates on top just to make sure that it actually works. Hopefully this will make a little bit of sense. So we have our material. Well, no, we don't. We need to create. I will expand this out. I know everybody complains about that. I will do it, honestly. For now though, we'll stick that on our plane, and we will grab flow map. Let's just use this one, and our diffuse texture. So that's just, where's our lava? Octile lava. You can see here that we have already something that's kind of working, but sort of not. Like, it has the same characteristics, but this obviously is a bit broken. It keeps going, and also, if you notice, it is actually scrolling the entire texture as well. That's not what we want. we want the flow map only to move where we specify, and then everything else stays still. So there's a couple of things at play here. Mostly we need the flow map, the UVs, and like the time to control it. And the time in this case is a little bit complicated. It's not super simple, but we will cover that as we go through some stuff. So the first thing that I am going to do, just as an example, is not create a texture sample. Let's create a time node, and I'm going to multiply this by just a float and make that a property. For now, we'll just leave it at that, but I'll just call this speed, and then we'll put these together. And what's really cool is, I think Shader Graph has this, but this is pretty new to Amplify. We have the sawtooth wave now, which is pretty key. This is, if I just open up previews, if I actually keep previews open for all of this so we can see what's going on. So what this is doing is it's basically going up to a value and then just immediately resetting, which is exactly what we want. And what we can do with this, just as an example, and it's again not going to be right, but just so we all see what happens, is we'll feed this time into this float which we had here, which I guess ordinarily would have been like our strength node property. Okay, so let's just have a look and see what this does. And so you can see here, it's pretty much the same as it was before. Like, it's not correct, but we at least kind of have something positive happening here with the time, in that it's resetting. If we didn't have it resetting, for example, if we just disregard the sawtooth node, then what you get is this, which is, it's basically just infinitely compressing all of this down, which is not what you want, because it has to reset. Like, for the flow map to work, the texture has to move and then go back to where it was, and the job here is to basically hide that transition. Otherwise, you know, it would just look pretty weird. So let's come back here. We definitely need these nodes, and we need most of this. It's just a bit of a rearrangement. So let's just focus more now on the time. To make this a little bit more user-friendly, actually, let's slow this down a bit, because I want to point out something that doesn't work very well. If I go to flow map, so I have this S curve here, which is just my own little test example, and basically it will start here over this area in the top left. Well, I mean, it starts everywhere, but it will move from the right, and it'll come down, left, down, right, down, left. And if we have a look at our speed, or just turn it down a bit, what you see happening is it starts off like in the opposite way. Like I think it's starting from like -1, and then it goes up to 1. So 0 is the point where the texture looks normal. This now is heading up to 1, and then it'll reset. So now the S is going the opposite way. Now it's beginning to go, wait, hang on. Now it's beginning to go the right way. Oh boy, this is tricky. So obviously that's a bit of a problem, because we don't want our flow map to spend half of its life going in the opposite direction that we specify. And unfortunately, it's a pretty simple fix, because we know that this is going from like -1 to 1. So all we need to do is remap it. So let's just bring this back up, and we'll feed this into here first, and we might as well just plug this in, and then we just need to change the values over here. So we have the old, which is not 0 to 1. The old, I think, go -1, and the minimum new is 0, and the maximum new is 1. I think that's correct. I often get this a bit confused, so bear with me. Let's have a look at that, make it a bit quicker. Yeah, so that's correct. So you can see it's flowing in one direction, and then it snaps back to the 0 state. So it's moving in one direction, snap back to 0. And that's, I mean, we're kind of mostly there. We have two problems now. One is the snapback is obviously very obvious. And the other, of course, is that our entire texture is still scrolling, which you don't want to do. We only want to move the areas that we specify on the flow map. It's very important for a flow map to have that feature. I think it is actually going the opposite way. It's really hard to tell. I don't know why I chose this lava texture as an example. I think rather than, yeah, it's going left. This would be a lot easier if I just show you what this is supposed to be doing. So if I get my S curve, which is not an S, loaded into here, then you can see that it is, you know, to the right, down, to the left, down, to the right, down. So as I was saying before, and if you look here, it is quite hard to tell, but it is actually pulling off the other way. And to fix that, we just need a negate here. I wonder if it's possible to actually do this with the remap. maybe not, not sure. But oh well, negate will work fine, so we'll just hook that in. And yeah, okay, so now I think it is actually going the correct way. Pretty cool. So we have two problems to fix basically. One is the trying to hide where our texture is snapping back, and the other one is we want to stop like everything from scrolling. So let's just do the snapping back stuff first, I think. No, I think it's going to be easier if we do the other way first. So let's stop our texture from scrolling, which means we're going to need to basically redo, well not redo, just change, which is another word for redo. Change some of the stuff that's happening here because things are about to get bigger. Yeah, so what we want to do is introduce some UVs, which we will be blending with what we have, and there's probably a better way to do this. I'm certainly open to suggestions, but this is the way that I found that worked. So we'll set this to an overlay. UV will be our source, this will be our destiny, and the alpha here will, so just leave that as 1. And what we're going to do is we're going to get a lerp, and the UVs are going to go into the A slot. This is going to go into the B slot, and already if you're looking at this and thinking it's weird, I agree entirely. And the alpha for this will actually be our time. So let's just get rid of that for now, and we'll grab all of our time nodes, and let's just register a local variable. So we'll just call this time A, because we're going to have a B and a C, spoiler alert, and we'll get that. So the get local var. So put that into the alpha. It's basically a longer way of doing what we had before, so it might seem a bit redundant, but at least now we can fix the scrolling issue. But for now, let's just register all of this, and we'll call this flow A, because there will be a flow B, spoiler alert, and probably don't want to keep any of this for now. In fact, let's just split this off just to make things neat and tidy. We will get another register, and we'll just call this diffuse or albedo or whatever it is. But before we were just using a regular texture object, but eventually we're going to want to actually split this off into 2. So give this just a random name for now, because I'm going to introduce a texture, not a sample, sorry. This is not a texture object, that's a texture sample. I am a good teacher. So yeah, texture object is what we want, and this one I want to have the name of diffuse, which is why I renamed this one to just def. It doesn't actually matter. I just don't want a conflict of names, which I think actually the Amplify guys have fixed now, but still, you know, old habits die hard. So for now, yeah, we're just having a texture object feed into a sample, but eventually we will have another sample with this same texture going into it. So for now, it doesn't really make much sense, but it will. While we're here, let's just get, and we will get our flow A. So this is our UVs, which is using time A, and let's put that into the UVs there. And let's just get our diffuse, and we'll stick that back into albedo. I'm only doing this now just to keep things nice and separated. Pretty cool. Let's have a look at the mess we've made. Pretty cool. We have the texture not moving anymore, so now we can just focus on our flow map, and it is moving, but obviously you can see it popping back, which is another thing that we have to fix, which is the hardest part of the flow map shader itself. There is also another issue that I completely forgot about, and that is the moment we can't really do any tiling. Ideally, you don't really want to be tiling your flow map unless you specifically have one that tiles, but ordinarily, like I was saying earlier, like the flow map can just be like a low resolution texture that you can even use to cover like an entire area to define the direction of like an entire river system or whatever. You can still split it off, which is probably recommended, but either way, what I'm saying is that there are more cases where you don't need to tile your flow map than there are cases where you do. So if you wanted to tile it, that would be quite simple. You just add a UV coordinate here and just put in a property of a float 1, vector 1 even, or float, I guess it's float vector. You can tell that I'm not very good at this. And you put that into tiling, make this a property, and then that will be the tiling of your flow map. Bada bing, bada boom. The reason that we don't do it with this one is because then that will tile both at the same time, and you know, ideally you kind of want to control these separately, but that's the problem that we're having at the moment, in that if I do, let's say I have a property here, let's call it tiling, because we'll keep this node, but to default of 1, and we'll stick this into tiling and give this a whirl. So now we have our tiling, but as you can see, it is tiling everything. Also, it's worth mentioning, my flow map I believe is set to clamp, yeah, because I don't want it to repeat, but if I did have it repeating, then it does the same thing, which is kind of weird actually, not what I was expecting. I thought that it would actually tile, but it seems that there's something that I'm missing there. But regardless, that is clearly not what we want. So let's go back to the drawing board a bit, and so we won't delete that because we're going to keep it. We'll have our tiling node up here, and we will just feed this into a different set of texture coordinates, and we will register this just to see what it looks like. So we'll just call this diffuse tiling. Put that in there. And I mean, that's pretty much it. The only problem is, of course, is that we need to hook this into our UVs. And this area here is our flow map UVs. In fact, let me just press the C key here and let's just try to tidy this up a bit. Nice, neat. So let's just expand this a bit, because what we want to do here is just get an add node, and we will add in the diffuse tiling that we just made. And I believe that should be good. So let's just see what this looks like. Let's have a look at this. Tiling. So tiling 2. Yeah, so you can see now the flow map is staying where it is, but we can tile our texture, which is, you know, pretty cool. And of course, if you wanted to, you could do world space UVs here. I have some water tutorials on my channel that cover that. Pretty simple though, and it's often best if you're dealing with kind of world creation, things like oceans and whatnot, where you want to use multiple components, like multiple planes to create an ocean, but you don't want any seams and gaps and whatnot. But for now, just as an example, this will do nicely. So yeah, we just need to fix this blip that we have happening here. And of course, this is just because the texture through the sawtooth time that we have happening here, it reaches 1, goes back to 0. So we need to mask out the point that it goes back to 0. And the way that we do that is we basically, we have 2 of these things happening, but they'll be offset from each other. And then right at the end, when it actually flips back from one to another, we'll just do like a little bit of a fade, basically, at the exact time that we need it. And then it would just look like it's constantly kind of moving, like a bit of a ebb and flow for sure, but definitely a good result. So let's come down to our time, because we're going to need another time, basically. We need one that is a little bit offset, and basically what we can do is just create a scale and offset node, and we'll copy all of these down here, and we'll put time stuff here that we're multiplying by our value that we can control. This will go into the scale and offset, and we'll just offset here by 0.5, and we'll just plug that in there. And I believe that's kind of okay. And this, we will make sure to rename this to time B. So that will essentially create, you know, like a mask that will be offset from the original one, which fixes a bit of the problem, but we're still going to have that snapping in place. So since we have 2 of these times, we are now going to do the other texture input, and we also need to have a flow B, because this one at the moment, the flow A, which is our UVs, is being controlled by time A, and we need another set which is being controlled by time B. And if that's confusing at all, I absolutely do not blame you. But essentially, we don't need to remake everything here. We'll just get another loop, and same thing. So the UVs into A, so UV into A, and then the blend operation we have here into B. But here we have the time A going into the alpha, so we will just get time B going into this alpha, and then we'll use an add, and we'll add in the diffuse tiling that we had up here, and then we can register this as flow B. So now we have time A, time B, and flow A and flow B. And because we have a flow B, we need to add it in where we're using flow A. So if I can just, come on now, do this. Let's create another texture sample, put this one into there. And then since this first texture sample that we have here is using A, the second one is going to be using flow B. Bada bing, bada boom. And now what we can actually just do just for now is we'll lerp these two together and the problem will hopefully present itself. Do this. We're going to just get a temporary slider here. So let's just have a look at this for now. It's going to be hard to show the offset, obviously. So you might just have to take my word on it. But at the moment, our value is set to 1, which means we are only viewing one of these UVs. And then if I go to 0, again, we're only seeing 1. And if I go to 0.5, then we're seeing both at the same time with, you know, kind of like opacity basically, which is not what you want. What you want is to go from 0 to 1, but to do it like right at the point where it kind of snaps back. So if you were to time it kind of right, like if I just try to do something like this, obviously if I do it manually, it's not going to work, but something kind of like that. So as one finishes and is about to be snapped back, it will lerp to the other one, which is just started its journey, and then it just repeats that. So it's just kaboingy boingy boingy. That's a technical term for it if you want. So we've got a clue here, basically. It's just the alpha point here that we need to get, and the answer lies, it has to lie somewhere within our time, because we know this is controlling the flow of our A, and this other one is controlling the flow of our B. So somewhere at the end of these, or at the end of one of these, we need to be able to plug an alpha into our diffuse lerp that at the correct time will lerp it to the other one, and then back and forth and back and forth. Basically what I'm going to do is I'll grab a divide node, and after our first remap, we will plug that into divide. And here you can just put in 0.5, or if it makes it easier for screenshots and things, what I kind of like to do is I'll actually put 0.5 as a constant. So this is not a value that's actually shown in the material, and then you can hook that into there. So it just means that, like, whilst you're glancing over your shader, you know that you're using 0.5 in here. But you know, if you don't care about that, then no biggie, because we've already specified the value. So we've just divided our first sawtooth time, and now we're going to like invert that with the 1 minus, and then we're going to get an absolute node and throw in a saturate for good measure, which I'm told is like clamp but like 10 times better. And we will register this as our, let's say, blend time, and let's come back up here. Let's get rid of our temporary. Sorry, but you were only temporary. And we'll get our blend time. And now this is our alpha. So if everything has been done correctly, we should have a fully working flow map. Yeah, seems pretty good to me. It's not the greatest example of a flow map, but if you put in an actual proper one, it looks a bit nicer. So let's say 0.2 on there. Obviously, depending on what flow map you use, it will have different results. So it's just, you know, it's up to you, whatever you want to use. Let's have a look at the temporary one that we did at the beginning. So we can see there that it is working nicely. You can certainly tell the point where it fades back, but that is definitely correct. It's, you know, we're not getting that quick kind of snap anymore. It's just this constant kind of fade into each other. And so to put on the finishing touches, I suppose, we also want to introduce just, let's just grab all of this. Did not want to grab that, dude. Let's create some normals and emissive, and then we'll call it a day, basically. For the normals, it's very, very simple. We're actually just going to copy paste the entire diffuse node that we have, and we'll just call this normals. The only difference is our texture here will be called normals, if you can type correctly. And for here, we want to make sure that we do unpack normal map and unpack normal map. And then here we'll change the register, because at the moment this is still diffuse, to normals. And that's it. So now we come down here and we get our normals. Plug that in there. And of course, the thing that you need with any normals is a smoothness value. And I'll also create a metallic for good measure. Alright, so let's go and see what that looks like. So rock tile lava, something like that. So it's looking a bit better now. Let's throw on this one again. Yeah, that's pretty gloopy. Let's continue. Oh, actually, you know what I forgot to do? Strength. We can control the speed of our flow map, but we can't control the strength of it. So what I want to do here is I'll create a multiply here, and I'll create another one here, and we'll get a float here, make it a property. We'll call this one strength, and give it a default value of, I guess, 1. And let's put this into here. So this is in our time node. It's essentially just going to act as the thing that stretches our texture even more or even less, depending on what your jam is. So let's have a look at this, see if it worked. So strength. In fact, if we bring this down to 0, then yeah, flow map isn't doing anything. Put it up to, you know, a little bit, and we get a little bit, you know, up to you. But let's just carry on with the emissive. The emissive is the last thing I think that we need to do. So again, let's just kind of copy the diffuse and so yeah, diffuse, we'll just call it emissive, and everything's pretty much the same here, except one thing that we do want to introduce is maybe the ability to change the emissive color, and with that we can also change the power. So pretty simple stuff. After the texture inputs, but before the lerp, we will introduce say a multiply here and a multiply there. Let's give ourselves a little bit more space. I think my mouse is dying. It does that thing where it clicks twice even though I only click once. We've got a multiply feeding into a lerp, but after our texture inputs, and we will just drop down a color here. This will be a property, and we will just call this, you can call it emissive power or color, it doesn't really matter. Kind of gonna do the same thing. So plug that into there, and also let's enable HDR ranges so we can make the bloom go absolutely crazy. And oh yeah, I forgot, we need to register this as emissive, not as diffuse. So lastly, we'll come here, go to emissive, and just plop that right on in the diffuse. Oh, okay. I forgot to name the emissive texture. So let's say emissive. Okay, cool. And let's go and grab our emissive. And it's not doing anything at the moment, I guess, because our emissive color is set to nothing. So if we pump that up, also we can increase the intensity of it. And then if you, I'll keep that there for now. If you enable post-processing, bada bing, bada boom, turn that on. Maybe we need some intensity. Oh yeah, look at that. Crank it up. James Cameron movie. Okay, so not like that. In fact, I think even like 20 is insane. So either way, we have this and it works now. And yeah, you can just increase or decrease your intensity, do whatever you want. Use it wherever you want. That's it. It's done, I think. I realize this has been a bit of a rambly tutorial. They usually are. So it is what it is, I guess. But yeah, I mean, it's good to be back. I know I've been away for a while. There's been some pretty big changes. And I'm assuming like right after this one, people are probably going to want to see the same thing in shader graph. Yeah, shader graph next. Probably remaking of the flow map. If not, I'll probably think of something else. But yeah, 2020 is going to be an interesting year. I'm not really sure where to take the channel yet. It's a bit of a mix and match at the moment, you know, with the modeling, shader graph, Amplify, texturing and all that good stuff. But you know, it is what it is. I'm essentially just making videos that reflect my day-to-day job anyway. So I don't really see it as a mix and match, because for me, this is kind of what a 3D artist is sort of supposed to be messing around with. You know, I don't know why I'm rambling on. I was supposed to keep this short. So yeah, let's just close all this down, and I mean, before I think of just something else to ramble on about, I will just end the video here. So thank you very much for watching. It's good to be back in 2020 and on YouTube and with all of my lovely subscribers. I'll see you in the next one, which will be a shader graph one, most probably.